Casting is arguably the single most underappreciated aspect of filmmaking, because no matter how great a script or director may be, it's extremely difficult to fix an actor who simply isn't right for the part. While we can't be sure how a given role will turn out until we're sitting down to watch it, it's clear that these 10 movies have all made utterly sublime, applause-worthy casting choices up front. So let's take a look at them. I'm Adam, this is What Culture, and here are 10 upcoming movies that made perfect casting choices. Number 10. Barry Keoghan, Ringo Starr, The Beatles. There are a few upcoming movie roles trickier to cast than that of The Beatles in Sam Mendes' upcoming 4-movie biopic project of the legendary pop group. And while the rest of the casting currently remains up in the air, the brilliant Barry Keoghan was recently confirmed to be playing the band's iconic drummer Ringo Starr. I mean, come on, this one just speaks for itself, really. Keoghan is an extremely talented and accomplished actor for one, and even though he's a good deal older than Starr was in the Beatles' formative years, he still bears a decent enough resemblance of a young Starr that he should fit the bill perfectly once makeup and wardrobe have done their job. Ringo might be a bit easier to cast than, say, Paul or John, that's true, but if Mendes had put a foot wrong here, fans would have certainly let him know about it. The fact that there's near universal satisfaction with Keoghan's casting really says it all. Number 9. Wendell Pierce, Perry White, Superman. Now, to be fair, the casting choices for James Gunn's Superman could more or less fill up this entire list, but here's one that hasn't been praised nearly enough. The Wire's brilliant Wendell Pierce will portray the Daily Planet's esteemed editor Perry White in the movie, and for anyone who's seen the man act, it requires precisely zero imagination to see him absolutely knock this role out of the park. Pierce's enormous screen presence and easy charisma will make him a perfect fit for White, as he's typically portrayed, authoritative and yet exasperated by all the shenanigans unfolding around him. Now, Pierce certainly has some big shoes to fill, following the memorable live-action performances by Jackie Cooper, Lane Smith, Michael McKean, Frank Langella, and most recently Lawrence Fishburne, but he also unquestionably has the chops and then some to pull it off. While Pierce was barely noticeable in the film's first trailer, he did recently post a photograph of himself on set and in character, while chomping on a cigar no less. Number 8. Christian Bale and Jessie Buckley, Frankenstein's Monster and His Bride, The Bride. Frankenstein's Monster and The Bride of Frankenstein are such prominent pop culture characters that it's incredibly difficult for new actors to offer interesting spins on the duo. And yet, Maggie Gyllenhaal's bold new punk rock take on the material, The Bride, boasts a pair of killer casting choices for its two leads. Christian Bale will play Frankenstein's monster, while Jessie Buckley will portray his bride. And from the few images we've seen so far, it looks like they're going to be taking some wild swings with these iconic characters. Bale's sheer visceral intensity makes him an easy fit for the monster, and there's no doubt whatsoever that he'll commit as hard as humanly possible to the role. And Buckley similarly never gives less than 100% to a part, and should help bring added nuance to a character who has too often been rendered as a thin caricature. Don't be shocked if they both receive Oscar nominations next year. Number 7. Dwayne Johnson, Mark Kerr, The Smashing Machine. This year, we're going to witness Dwayne Johnson like we've never seen him before, as he portrays former wrestler and mixed martial artist Mark Kerr in Betty Safdie's new film, The Smashing Machine. While that might sound like a natural fit for The Rock on paper, he doesn't actually bear that much of a natural facial resemblance to the real Kerr, and so wore extensive prosthetics to change his distinctive mug, while also donning a head of hair. Yet with Uncut Gems filmmaker Safdie serving as writer-director, it's easy to have complete faith in Johnson's casting, that he's almost certainly going to give the best performance of his career to date, and could even end up courting serious awards consideration given some of the darker aspects of Kerr's life story. It'll be fascinating to see Johnson operating in a high dramatic gear after spending so many years working in broader than broad, totally unchallenging blockbuster fare. Number 6. Tom Cruise, Alejandro G. Iñárritu's new film. Tom Cruise is such a larger-than-life figure that there's a lot of parts he's simply too big to play nowadays. But his new leading role in the untitled new film from Alejandro González Iñárritu, famous for Birdman and The Revenant, sounds like a perfect fit for his stature. The utterly wild premise casts Cruise as the most powerful man in the world, who sets out on a mission to prove that he's humanity's savior before a disaster he's unleashed destroys everything. Yeah, that'll about do it. Given that Cruise has spent almost 30 years playing Mission Impossible's Ethan Hunt, a character once famously referred to as the living manifestation of destiny, it's tough to picture an actor better suited to portray the most powerful man in the world. Though we don't know yet whether Inarritu's film has literally supernatural elements or not, it's nevertheless a welcome, long overdue return to dramatic, auteur-driven filmmaking for Cruise. And don't be shocked if this is the role that finally wins him that damn Oscar. And while we're here, guys, make sure that you let us know down in the comments who you think is the best casting choice that you've ever seen in a movie. Patrick Stewart as Professor Charles Xavier, maybe? Ian McKellen as Gandalf? So many to choose from. Make sure you let us know, and while you're there, make sure you give us a like and a subscribe. Alright, now back to the list. Number 5, Coleman Domingo, Bobby Thompson, The Running Man. Edgar Wright's new adaptation of The Running Man will surely be endlessly compared to the Arnold Schwarzenegger starring 1987 version, and that's especially true where its casting is concerned. While it remains to be seen whether Glenn Powell can truly hold his own as Ben Richards, the part originally played by Schwarzenegger, perhaps the most inspired slither of casting so far sees Coleman Domingo playing the dystopian game show's eccentric host, Bobby Thompson. In the 87 movie, the equivalent role was played brilliantly by real-life game show host Richard Dawson. And while it's a tough act to follow, Domingo's velvety voice and unrelenting charisma should make him a snug fit. The role crucially requires an actor who can appear superficially appealing and outgoing to the masses, even while harboring a seriously nasty streak. And everything we've seen from the now two-time Oscar nominee suggests he's going to have an absolute ball with this role. Number 4, Tom Hardy, Walker, Havoc. If you ever need an actor to portray a physically imposing, uniquely intense badass, there are a few better choices than Tom Hardy. And he looks set to up the ante with his next project for Netflix, the gritty action thriller Havoc. Havoc's notable hook is that Hardy will be teaming up with the Raid director Gareth Evans, who's known for delivering bone-crunching, gasp-inducing violence, and should find perfect harmony with Hardy's physical commitment to his roles. Hardy will play Walker, a tortured detective who battles his way through a criminal underworld in pursuit of a politician's estranged son. It goes without saying that this basic plot should give Evans all the canvas he needs to execute some gnarly action sequences. And with the CGI slathered Venom trilogy now in his rear view, it'll be neat to see Hardy working in the grounded action movie realm once again. Number 3, Chris Sanders, Stitch, Lilo and Stitch. In the original animated Lilo and Stitch, co-writer and director Chris Sanders also provided the unmistakable voice of the titular extraterrestrial creature Stitch. But when the impending live-action remake was announced, there was no guarantee that Disney would invite Sanders back to reprise his role. I mean, come on. Would it have surprised anyone if the Mouse House swapped Sanders out for a more high-profile A-lister voice, say a Chris Pratt type? Thankfully, that ultimately wasn't the case, as Sanders was indeed rehired to play Stitch once more, with his distinctive vocals even being heard in the brief teaser trailer. There's really no case to make it all here. If you've seen the original animated movie, you'll appreciate the brilliance of Sanders' spirited voice performance. I mean, it had to be him, there's no one else. Given that Lilo and Stitch has endured as something of a cult classic since its 2002 release, Disney would have been extremely misguided to pointlessly recast Stitch, but also, would it have totally surprised anyone? Number 2, Jason Momoa, Lobo, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. Long before Jason Momoa ever played Aquaman on screen, he was a fan favorite casting choice to portray another DC superhero altogether, the loudmouth cigar-chomping space biker, Lobo. And once James Gunn's rebooted DC Universe was announced, it was rumored that Gunn was considering Momoa for a new role, with all the smart, hopeful money indeed being on Lobo. And lo and behold, it was just recently confirmed that Momoa will indeed be playing Lobo in Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, which began shooting in London at the start of this year. I mean, you need only take a single fleeting glance at Lobo to appreciate that Momoa basically looks born to play. The physical resemblance is strong enough that you'd even be forgiven for assuming that Lobo was modeled after Momoa, and Momoa's whole vibe, including his own personal style and voice. They're all 100% on brand with the character. There's no denying Momoa and the role of Lobo were basically made for each other. And number 1, Micah Monroe and Mary Elizabeth Winstead, The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. Easy though it is to sniff at remakes of hit movies, the impending reimagining of classic 90s psychological thriller The Hand That Rocks the Cradle does benefit from some immediately irresistible casting choices. Veteran Scream Queen Micah Monroe has been cast alongside Mary Elizabeth Winstead, with Monroe set to play the vengeful, psychotic nanny previously portrayed by Rebecca De Mornay, while Winstead will play her intended victim, played by Annabella Schurer in the original. Even with the duo having sizable shoes to fill, it's easy to see how this dynamic will be absolutely dynamite on screen. I can't wait to see this. They're both fantastic actors with a strong track record in the genre, so why wouldn't they absolutely nail it? While Monroe typically plays embattled heroines, her brooding qualities make her a perfect fit for the film's villain, while Winstead should be absolutely incredible and empathetic as her target. As a remake of this particular story goes, the casting here is basically a best case scenario.